We are glad that you are here. Please take your hymnals and open with me to 139. 139, Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. And we're going to sing the first and the last stanza, stanzas 1 and 3. And the hymn number is 139. Would you stand with me, please? Standing together, 139. Brother Carl, would you open us in prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, we just thank you for the time that we have to come together in midweek. We thank you that this is a true blessing to us, where we get to hear the word even just for a few minutes, to re-energize and refocus. We thank you for this beautiful time of the year, Lord. It's so pretty up here. We thank you for the economy that you're giving the valley. But most of all, Lord, we thank you for this body of believers, this family that we have, and that we just get edified and fed and stay focused on your word. And Lord, we just ask that you would give us wisdom to understand what is being taught, that you would allow it to stay with us, that we think about it, meditate on it, and just apply it to our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Please be seated. So let me give you a couple of quick announcements, and they are as follows. We have a lot of things to pray for. I'll go over that after devotions. But do remember tomorrow, ladies, Senior Saint Fall Brunch at the Parsonage. Let Lori know if you can come. So that's tomorrow at 10 at the Parsonage. And then looking ahead to Sunday, we'll plan to have a deacons meeting. I think it's scheduled for 3:45 in the afternoon. Next week, 1 week from tomorrow, NRBFC Fall Bible Conference at Augusta, and you could pray for people traveling in from all over New England for that, and you can pray for me. I'm one of the speakers for that, so I think I have one of the sessions on Friday morning, so pray for that conference. And then lots of other things going on in October, including Mary Martha Kingsman, Men's Strategic Prayer, Luke 12:48 Ministries is heading to Maple Ave in Elmira, and Men's Prayer Breakfast, end of the month, and Soup and Sandwich Sunday, one of our favorites. We enjoy that very much. And also, the last Wednesday of October will be business meeting. So be in prayer for the Lord's direction for that. And this last Sunday's bulletin did have calendar and prayer calendar in it as well. You can take advantage of that. Open your Bibles with me, please, to Proverbs chapter 14. Proverbs 14 tonight for a couple of minutes. We have seen that Proverbs is a book of wisdom written by Solomon, and it has the format is Hebrew poetry, so it's a little different than much of the Bible, and it consists of usually one line and then some sort of a contrast and a second line. It could be the opposite, or it could take the idea a little farther and run with it. But Hebrew poetry is set up a little bit differently than English poetry. Doesn't have rhyming, doesn't necessarily have meter or rhythm to it, but it operates on this concept of parallelism. And so that's what Hebrew poetry is. And the Proverbs are exactly that. They are generally true statements. They're not to be taken as promises, because we can find many places where what Solomon writes is, is not to be taken as something that God is guaranteeing, but he is saying this is a generally true principle. And so here we are in Proverbs 14. We're going to cover the first 10 verses of this chapter tonight. Pardon me. Proverbs 14, allow me to read for you the first 10 verses. The wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. He who walks in his uprightness fears the Lord, but he who is devious in his ways despises him. In the mouth of the foolish is a rod for his back, but the lips of the wise will protect them. Where no oxen are, the manger is clean, but much revenue comes by the strength of the ox. A trustworthy witness will not lie, but a false witness utters lies. A scoffer seeks wisdom and finds none, but knowledge is easy to one who has understanding. Leave the presence of a fool, or you will not discern words of knowledge. The wisdom of the sensible is to understand his way, but the foolishness of fools is deceit. Fools mock at sin, but among the upright there is goodwill. The heart knows its own bitterness, and a stranger does not share its joy. Many of these proverbs are very similar to others that we have seen, and ones that we'll see farther along. And so there is an element of redundancy or repetition, sometimes with a little tweaking of words. But there's also a few other things in here that are new that we haven't seen yet. So let's take a look at these one by one. The wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. Solomon's probably not talking about a physical structure. He's probably not talking about a woman who uses a hammer and nails and so on. That would have been very foreign to the concept of what men's work was and women's work was in the ancient world anyways. So what is he talking about? A wise woman does what? Takes care of her family. It looks for ways to build people. It's more about people than it is a physical dwelling. And a wise woman is attempting to build things up. It may well have to do with a negative attitude or bitterness or sarcasm or pessimism that's being talked about here. The wise one builds her house, but a foolish woman tears it right down with her own hands. Verse 2. Now, I've said before that, much of what is the content of Proverbs is what we might call common sense, or maybe a godly view of common sense. But not every verse has the name of God or the name of the Lord in it. So when we see identified the name of the Lord, it sort of stands out a little bit. It kind of catches our attention. And here in verse 2, we have one of those occurrences. He who walks in his uprightness fears the Lord. And there's all caps in our English versions. So that's in Hebrew, Yahweh or Jehovah. What does that mean? He who walks in his uprightness fears the Lord. Put that in your own words.
It's kind of like what we talked about in Bible study this morning, that you need to have a healthy respect and fear of the Lord and know his power and his holiness.
So if you watch somebody who is careful in his dealings, who's honest, who's upright, who has good business dealings with people, he doesn't try to give somebody else a short end of the stick. He doesn't lie. He's truthful. And you watch that kind of a person for a little while, there is a good chance that that person actually is a believer and has a fear of God. That person may well, have you ever had this experience? You go to a restaurant and the family at the table next to you, there's just something about their behavior. And they seem to be polite to each other. They're polite to the waitress. They seem to be, careful in what they're saying. They're positive. They smile at each other. And you, as you're watching them, just kind of out of the corner of your eye, you think, I wonder if they're Christians. And then maybe they get served their meal, and then you watch, and they hold hands and bow their heads and pray. And say, They are Christians. And so, you can't always tell. We don't have foolproof vision. But here it is saying, the individual who walks in uprightness, that means righteousness, truthfulness, honesty, integrity, that kind of a person generally is the kind of a guy who fears the Lord. He has an understanding that there is an accountability before God, and one day I will stand before him. But he who is devious in his ways despises him. What's devious? Sneaky, tricky, deceptive. An ulterior motive, a hidden agenda. And that kind of an individual, whether he knows it or not, what is he actually doing? What's it say? He despises God. Interesting. So he may not even put it like that. He might not even think in his head or say it out loud, I can't stand God. But by his behavior, by his attitude, by his character, he actually is despising the Lord.
Isn't this very similar to the end of John 3 that talks about those who walk in the light?
Yeah.
Like the light.
Sure.
Want their deeds exposed, but those that walk in darkness.
Exactly. So walking in the light versus walking in darkness. Very good. Number 3. This is, some proverbs almost have a little sense of humor. They almost have a little humorous barb in them. And here's one of them. In the mouth of the foolish is a rod for his back. You see the play on words? So it's mouth and back. And, in his mouth, he's carrying around what? A stick, a rod. What's it for? Hitting him on the back. What does it mean, in the mouth of the foolish is a rod for his... What does that mean? What he says is so foolish and so wrong and whatever that you use his own words against him. You can discipline him with his own words. And that kind of an individual is said to be foolish because he gives you ammunition for disciplining him out of his own mouth. Now flip that around, the next half of that verse, the second line. But the lips of the wise will protect them. What's that? Lips of the wise will protect in what way? Well, in the context of the first line, the second line is saying, the wise people don't do that. They don't give you ammunition by saying, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, and then they never do it. They don't lie. They don't try to trick you. They don't have something hidden. So wise people do not supply the ammunition for their own discipline. The lips of the wise protect them. Verse 4 is a personal favorite of mine. Where no oxen are, the manger is clean, but much revenue comes by the strength of the ox. And I would like to draw a direct connection to the state of my desk. My desk could be very, very clean, could be spotless, but there wouldn't be any sermon on Sunday. Well, Carl's seen it recently. He knows. he's politely keeping quiet back there. My desk is not clean. Misty's seen it too, because she cleans in there. And they're very politely keeping their mouths shut. Well, where the manger is, where the ox is, the manger is not clean. Why? Because you've got feed in there. And the cow is chewing and feeding and whatever. And, So what is Solomon saying? Well, he's saying you have to kind of make a choice. What your priorities are. If your priority is, I want a clean manger, I don't want to have to clean up after an animal. Okay, you can have that. But guess what? You will never plow those 10 acres by yourself. You can't do it. You have to have an oxen. You've got to have animals to do that. So you have to make a choice. And my choice is what Warren affectionately calls pastor piles. So pastor piles are piles of file folders, papers, and books that accumulate to critical mass. And
Need a secretary.
I need to get organized is what I need. But the idea here is there's work going on, there's productivity, and that's a good thing. Notice also in verse 5, a trustworthy witness will not lie, but a false witness utters lies. This is pretty straightforward. There's not anything hidden here. What is Solomon saying?
If you're an honest person, you don't lie, and a dishonest person does lie.
Exactly. So if you have a court case or some sort of dispute, you call on a witness, you want a witness who's known for telling the truth. And if he tells the truth, then you can trust what he says. If you call a liar to the witness stand, well, they're going to lie. You can't trust it. It's pretty straightforward. Verse 6, a scoffer seeks wisdom and finds them. Now, what is the biblical definition of a scoffer?
Like a mocker?
Okay, good. So a mocker, a scoffer, somebody who is wrong, but he wants to be wrong. And you can't correct him. You can't tell him there's a better way, or listen to me, you're going down the wrong road. He won't listen to that. He won't receive rebuke. He will not receive correction. So a scoffer, it says, seeks wisdom and finds none. Now wait a minute. I thought James chapter 1 says, if anybody lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men generously. That is, in fact, a pretty accurate paraphrase of James 1. How does that fit with this?
Because if you're a scoffer, you're not seeking real knowledge, and you're not seeking the Lord. You think you're
Exactly. There's a predisposition that says that I don't want to find God's wisdom. I don't want to be corrected. I don't want to be told the truth. I like what I'm doing, so don't tell me any differently. So a scoffer says he's looking for wisdom, but he'll never find real wisdom. He may find worldly wisdom. He may find a kind of wisdom, but it's not going to be God's wisdom. And so he finds none, but knowledge is easy to one who has understanding. In other words, somebody who has discernment, somebody who can think through the world scene or culture or whatever the problem might be that's in front of my face. If I can think through from God's perspective, from God's angle, what is truth? What really is going on here? That kind of an individual has an advantage. He's going to find knowledge. Look in verse 8. The wisdom of the sensible is to understand his way, but the foolishness of fools is deceit. Somewhat similar. I'm sorry, I skipped one, didn't I? Verse 7. Leave the presence of a fool, or you'll not discern words of knowledge. What's this about? Relationships. So don't hang around people who are going to rub off on you with their foolishness. Foolishness is not just smarts. It's an attitude. It's a relationship to God. There's a spiritual component to it. And if you discover that somebody who's a close friend is not a godly person, you want to be really careful, because they can influence you in a wrong way. Verse 8, the wisdom of the sensible is to understand his way. So the wise person, the sensible person, wants to understand, how do I arrange my life? How do I figure out how to make decisions? How do I arrange priorities? What do I do with this? But the foolishness of fools is deceit. In other words, they're just tricking themselves. Fools, their character is they're always going to be looking for something that sounds good to them, but they're going to trick themselves. Verse 9, fools mock at sin. Here's a different kind of a fool. And what does this fool do? They make light of sin. They laugh at it. They think it's funny. I remember, you probably do too, when we were much younger, we watched some television, we watched some sitcoms, and I can't even think of the names of any of them, back in the 80s or something. But I remember being disturbed at how Hollywood, how television producers were portraying issues such as how did the typical sitcom from 35 years ago present a kid in a family who does wrong and messes up badly, and it's not just a mistake, but it's what we would call sin. Well, he messes up, but then without any genuine change of heart, everything works out. Everything's okay at the end. And the lesson is, you can do whatever you want, and there's no accountability. There are no consequences. Or think back 35, 40 years ago on television. In the typical television sitcom family, who was in charge? The mother was. The mother ran it. What did the father look like? A class 1 doofus. The dad was a doofus, always. What were they saying? Well, they were saying that they're normalizing sin. They're normalizing things that are wrong. Eventually they're laughing at it. Well, that's what this is. Fools mock at sin, but among the upright there is goodwill. Now, again, there's a little hint here that the idea is among the upright there's good fellowship. There's genuine caring. There's genuine camaraderie. But the flip side of that would be, as the fools mock at sin, what kind of fellowship, what kind of connection, relationship do they have with each other? It's only one of convenience. It's only superficial, because as soon as fools, sinners, butt heads, they get very mad at each other. There's not real, genuine caring in that crowd. So among the upright there's goodwill. Verse 10 is a strange verse. The heart knows its own bitterness, and a stranger does not share its joy. Kind of a thoughtful, thought-provoking, contemplative sort of a verse. What is it saying? What's Solomon saying there?
If you're a bitter person, you don't take joy in anything?
Maybe, probably a little bit better would be something like, somebody can put on a show of being fine, but inside they might be really hurting. And the only person who really knows the sorrow, the grief that is being borne is that one person. Likewise, the heart knows its own joy. There is a joy, there is a tranquility, there's a peace that comes from God that only that one soul can truly grasp. So, you probably in your walk with the Lord have been through times of great sorrow, times of great stress, and you know what it is in those times of great, great sorrow to find the peace of God and to realize God loves me and it's going to be okay. You also know, going through deep, deep waters, other people try to help. They try to say comforting words, and they mean well, and they are friends. They're true Christian brothers and sisters. But that soul, your soul, is bearing that burden. At times like that, of course, it's good to remember that there is one person who truly does know what you're going through, and that would be God. He does know entirely, completely, exactly what it is that you're bearing. So, comments or questions on Proverbs 14? If you'll take your prayer bulletins, let me share with you